are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai Quartey, and joining me now is a man who knows immigration law from the inside out. He is a nationally recognized immigration attorney and business strategist. His counsel has guided families and business leaders and communities through some of the most complex legal terrain in this country. Allen Orr Jr., Esquire, welcome back to the show, my friend.
Happy to be here. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Happy Monday. Well, Allen, let's start with the U.S. Supreme Court's rulings today, because I really want our listeners, particularly our Black and Latino families, many of whom have loved ones navigating the system right now. I really want them to understand what just happened. The court effectively dismantled Humphrey's 91 years of precedent protecting independent agencies like the FTC, the EEOC, NLRB, agencies that are supposed to be insulated from political pressure. What does this mean in the real world, particularly for communities of color?
So, I think it means the same for everyone, to be honest. So to sort of not to distinguish it, it basically turns the reality TV presidency into the TV show The Apprentice. And so at any given time, he can fire anybody without any recourse or regard. And the reason why this is troubling, let's start from a legal perspective, is because of the precedent. For 90 years, this was the rules. This is what we learned in law school. And now all of a sudden, the Supreme Court just out of the blue decided to change it with no reason at all and without congressional oversight. Who created these agencies? So in the articles, when things are created, we know that Congress is created first, which means they should have more power, specifically with regards to these regulations of these different agencies. But what the Supreme Court has done, not just in this case, but in this term, has consistently taken power away and given it to the executive branch. So what it means for people who work in those agencies today is that you have no foundation or safety of work. It runs the best people away from working these government jobs because there's not consistency in employment, because at any given time, the president can decide, I don't like you for whatever reason. Even in the case with Lisa Cook, and they said, you can't just dismiss her. They didn't say it was a bad thing. They just said you have to have due process. And then you heard the acting attorney general come out and say, we'll look for an indictment coming soon. So it doesn't really change the way it did. It just limits the power and say she needs due process first, just because of the special status of that organization, not that perhaps the president won't be able to fire her.
Now, Allen, on the mail-in ballot ruling, the court said that states can count mail-in ballots that arrived late as long as they were postmarked before Election Day. Now, Trump went to social media immediately and called this a loss. The RNC brought the challenge, arguing federal law preempted Mississippi state law, and then the court rejected that. Talk to us about the significance here, especially for voters in our community who rely on mail-in ballots.
Right. So let's speak about it being 5-4. First of all, so that doesn't mean that it was a strong sort of understanding of what the rights of voters are, because this wasn't a concern. The concern was about counting ballots if they were postmarked before the election was called. So we're not even saying these are people who voted after election. It's just this concept of Election Day, which for people in California should be very concerned about, counting the ballots on one day when you have such a large population. In small towns, fine, do it whenever you do it. But in large facilities where you want to take care, and there's a lot of mail-in ballots, it takes a longer time to sort of process that. We just recently saw that. So it's a concern about a democracy, about saying the value of a vote. And the charge from the White House is that if you count ballots after Election Day, there might be room for fraud. And we could see that maybe if it was 6 months or something of that sort. But 5 days and being postmarked before the vote really changes the dynamics. And the reason that's important is for people like you and I who live in these central cities, it's not a big deal to get to a polling place. But for other people, it could be miles to get to a place to actually do your vote. And it could be disservicing to if you have to work, or there's a variety of reasons why someone would do a mail-in ballot, including the president has done mail-in ballots. So the concept is very stern in the Voting Rights Act, but we should know this is another chipping away at the Voting Rights Act. And the issue here is we're talking about Mississippi. It wasn't California. It wasn't New York. It wasn't D.C. claiming this. It was Mississippi saying we wanted this, right? And they're a partner in this foolishness of redistricting and all the other things along the board. So that exactly tells you that all friends along the road in this diminishing shouldn't work. And the Supreme Court had a very narrow ruling here. They didn't really say how much time after it should be counted. So that could always come back to the court. And we've seen the court accept other cases now about voting rights for the next term. So we need to be very careful about those things moving forward.
I mean, So for a lot of voting rights advocates out there, for a lot of voter protection lawyers out there, is this a sigh of relief, or is this just sort of, a blip in the continued fight for voting rights in this country?
I think it's a small win along the way, and the Trump administration wanted to do something well. The Trump administration is sort of amorphous in making these arguments, right? And so now they're going to sort of shift and say, now we need the SAVE Act because this was sort of passed for voting rights. And if they other way, then you wouldn't have needed it, right? So they're able to make arguments for whatever the circumstance is in the favor of this fraud that doesn't exist, right? Even their own organization can only count 100 cases of people voting who should not have voted in the last 10 years. So when the numbers are that small, based on the millions of people who vote, it's sort of a red herring wasted to sort of go after some concept that you won an election. And we already know that this president has been really wrapped up in saying, I even won the last election at all charges. So this concept of chasing these numbers and trying to say you win when you didn't win is really important. And you've heard the Republican Party say this. Listen, we say there was fraud in the election, but we all won. We won the House. We won the Senate, right? We have the White House. So where is the fraud? Whose election is fraudulent? Who's going to step down? Because if the election is fraudulent, then you shouldn't be there. And that's the real concern. How can you say something is fraudulent when you are the victor in that category? Does it make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I've been asking this question from Jump Street, and every single time, not just this president, but Republicans have been crying voter fraud for a very long time. And it's always interesting, and our leaders, learners, and listeners should pay attention to this. They cry voter fraud, even though they're fine with having won these elections, right? Even here in California, right? You remember Chad Bianco, the Riverside County sheriff, running for governor. Steve Hilton, who is now the one of the top vote getters, who's going on in November to compete to become the next governor of California. Both of them have been on the record calling into question the integrity of our elections, even though Steve Hilton was one of the top vote getters.
That's right.
Right. And so not only him, but even Donald Trump, right after the California primary, had suggested that there was some cheating going on, even when their guy won.
That's right. And it undermines the election. It makes people feel uneasy about their certainty with regards to our own elections in this country, where we know that it's really hard. I mean, this is a very difficult thing to do, is to rig an election, because the states handle it, especially a federal election, right? So there's just so many moving parts that even we saw and we've seen in our history, where people try to change the election results and they're unsuccessful because of the difficulties in doing that at a state level with the false electors and the like.
And we've grown up hearing Republican standard bearers talk about states' rights, right? Well, now under Trump is trying to consolidate power with the federal government, right? And so the Republican Party, is going through a major identity crisis, and that's if you're being kind about it.
Yes. Well, it also is a message to us. If voting wasn't that important, then why would they be taken away from us? So with regards to the things that we can't control our turnout. And our turnout has not been great in a lot of places where it could be better. And so now's the time to make a plan to vote for whatever these elections are, to inform yourself. So if you feel you don't know who the candidates are, then you can show up for them. If you don't know when the elections are, you can find out when the elections are to make sure you show up. We need to vote as if we were fighting the civil rights movement way before, in such a number that even if there's no question about what the rights of the people were and the concerns were, and people say, well, Allen, it's all the same. It is not all the same, right? In a year and a half, the rights of many individuals who are Black and brown has gone way downhill with regards to a ton of things: your educational system, your children getting food, whatever you want to name, any perspective, education, environment, the future, bonds, savings, the banking, gas, all of those things that we were promised that were going to change in this sort of election have not changed.
Allen, I want to ask you something big picture, because you operate at the intersection of law and strategy. That's part of the reason why I always just love learning from you. We have a Supreme Court that just gave the president unprecedented power to reshape every regulatory agency in the executive branch. We have a president who may or may not sign a housing bill that would actually help working families. How do our communities navigate this moment legally and politically?
So I invite people to relax in the moment and understand that just like before, this is a stress test of our democracy. And we need to figure out where there have been problems with whoever the elected president is and close those loopholes and understand the challenges of even the Supreme Court. So when you have a Supreme Court that within the span of a year has changed its own precedent against itself and 90-year precedents in the same time, you know factually there's a problem with that court because it's not about the rule of law anymore. They're making policy from the bench, which they're not supposed to do. And so in those limitations, we need to have the strategy to say, wait a minute, our democracy has been fine this 250 years that we made it through, but we have some problems. It's time to update. It may be time to do some Supreme Court reform. It may be time to update the Constitution. It's definitely time to make voter rights stronger at the state level and at the federal level. And we need governors of these blue states to step up and say, you know what? I'm going to do what I can in my state to protect you where the federal government would not protect you before. So a lot of these things that were EEOC, the environment, things are double duplicated within the state. And if the federal government has stepped back on their policy, doesn't mean that the state can't fill up that gap. So we need to be strategic and understanding as they move the pieces across the board. We need to move our pieces across the board and make sure that California, New York, Maryland, Virginia now, where we're able to push through policies that fill in the gap of the federal government until we get to the next election, vote in those numbers, and then repair our democracy by saying, okay, this can never happen again.
That's a part of the assignment. And so all these folks who are talking about running for president in 2028, these are some of the questions that we should be taking to them on the campaign trail. You know, as they're out and about doing meet and greets, like we should really understand, you know, what they intend to do, what their vision is, right? Is it about nostalgia? Is it about, really sort of recasting the past? Or is it about really understanding this moment and envisioning something new and different?
I think that's why the conversation is happening right now around what socialism is, what communism is, and who got elected. And I think it's peculiar that the Republicans are so good at throwing out names to make people feel like a party is one thing or the next, when the actions of the individuals who participate in these roles speak to the people's needs. The mayor of New York City has a great track record, right? People are invigorated. So I don't care what you call him. His policies are addressing the needs of the people that he represents and doing so in an equitable fashion, right? So these concerns that people have about titles should be alleviated because now you have a dictatorship, and even though you call it democracy, and you don't see those challenges where you see the Congress doing nothing, passed no laws, the worst Congress ever. The Supreme Court basically saying, we're going to let the president do whatever he wants to do with the executive branch, no checking on him at all, right? That's a problem for us to understand when we say we have three branches of government and they're supposed to be co-equal, right? And all the challenges that we have with our security, firing people that have been in our national security for years, losing all that, downsizing our government, education going back to the state levels when many states have the worst education across the board. If we're really concerned about who we are and the politics of things, we've been looking at different metric. And the next thing we have to know is the stock market does not define how well or how horrible America is doing. That just can't be the test anymore because only a few companies are making the stock market is today. And so whether it be 60 in a couple of weeks, doesn't matter to me when so many people are unemployed, can't afford food, aren't getting assistance, don't have health care. We've had the biggest decrease in healthcare across the board. And as you've heard with the World Cup being here, we're one of the few nations that does not have universal health care in the World Cup. How not funny is that?
I mean, you're absolutely right. You know, basically don't purchase the wolf tickets. Basically don't fall for the okie doke because you're right. There are these indicators, you know, that don't accurately represent what is happening in the everyday lives of the people in our families, the people in our communities, the people in our congregations. And, you know, we're going to continue to speak truth to power when it comes to those things because, you know, there's no returning back to the way the world once was.
Doesn't exist. Pre-COVID does not exist.
Right.
Pre-Trump does not exist.
It is a whole nother ball of wax. And, you know, given, you know, the AI industry on steroids, we're going to have to fight like hell to make sure that the future is human-centered, right? And not technology-centered. When we come forward, more with immigration attorney Allen Orr Jr., there are plenty of other headlines that are percolating, and we want to separate the fact from the fiction. We got a real one. More with Allen Orr when we come forward.
The audience is listening. Thought-provoking, eye-opening, heart-rendering. This is where authentic voices meet powerful discussions on culture, community, and change. This is where Black voices matter. He's breaking boundaries, amplifying diverse perspectives, and tackling the issues that matter most to you. You're inside A More Perfect Union with Dr. Nii-Quartelai Quartey on KBLA Talk 1580.
You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai Quartey, and still with us, immigration attorney extraordinaire, Allen Orr Jr. Allen, this next story is one that I think is going to hit people pretty hard because it's a story of trust betrayed at the most vulnerable moment of someone's life. A Washington state attorney named Alexandra Lozano promised miracles to tens of thousands of immigrants desperate for legal status in this country. What she allegedly did instead, according to multiple lawsuits and a legal ethics investigation, was create fabricated stories of domestic abuse and human trafficking to apply for humanitarian visas without her client's knowledge. Her signature is on more than 53,000 pending cases. Clients paid her anywhere from $30,000 to $32,000, only to find themselves facing removal proceedings. And her firm allegedly hired workers in Colombia, Mexico, and Argentina who had no proper legal credentials. One former employee told investigators that she told staff to, quote, please invent more information about the abuse because it is not real abuse. And here's the compounding tragedy. There are visas designed for people who were actually trafficked and abused. The Trump administration used the surge in applications as justification to tighten the very humanitarian programs that protect real victims. What's your immediate reaction to this?
It's a sad story. It's unfortunate, and that attorney has, well, they're disbarred. They stepped down from the bar in that disregard, but it's awful that someone would take advantage of a vulnerable community. I also will say out of that cohort, some of those things are multiple applications for the same individual. And some of those individuals potentially do have relief. They just have to have their story vetted and maybe expressed to the government in a different way. The government has made a pathway for people to withdraw their cases, which doesn't necessarily provide them with a way to put their cases back in. So fraud happens, criminality happens in all professions. This is not exemplify or sort of speak to the immigration bar or to all the other individuals who have filed cases for this type of relief.
Yeah. And what do you want our leaders, learners, and listeners to know about how to protect themselves from a situation like this?
It's a difficult situation, but if something seems too good to be true, it generally is not true. Probably have a good vetted immigration attorney, someone that you trust, that someone else has got an experience with, or someone in your family's had an experience with. This type of case situation is very rare. And these sort of humanitarian relief things make big vulnerabilities. So, for example, now with the ending of TPS, there might be a lot of people who might try to take advantage of this cohort of people on dreams of saying, I will file X, Y, Z for you to make sure you can still remain in the country. Those things need to be vetted. And best place to call is to start with your bar, to just call the bar association within your community and say, someone's trying to sell me this. Does this sound right to you? Right? It's generally for lawyers, but it's a good place to sort of think about it. The other thing is to see three lawyers. See three lawyers, get three consultations, and see if they're telling you the same thing. If one person is promising you something for an amount of money that seems untrue, inconsistent with the others, then you know that that's out of step, and that might be a wild dream. So there are no miracle workers in this immigration perspective right now. And in many cases, you might need someone to tell you that you don't have any relief right now, and you should make other plans. There are free clinics for immigration that happen either through Catholic Charities or through your local bar association or through community events. The DC bar has one every quarter. Other bars do different things, but look for those free events to go to and learn the knowledge about your individual case. Do not be a victim. There is a lot of anti-fraud stuff also published throughout these different organizations of saying, if someone doesn't have a bar license, if someone's not in good standing, if someone's working on immigration law outside the United States telling you what the rules are, those are signs you may not be getting the service that you need to help you matriculate the system inside the United States.
Allen, in our remaining minutes, I want to ask you about the Mississippi story, too, because it connects to all of this. A new law taking effect this Wednesday, it authorizes the State Department of Public Safety to compile a registry, a list of every undocumented immigrant living in Mississippi. We're talking names, addresses, country of origin, adult or minor, criminal history. This is an ongoing 2-year surveillance effort. Advocates are already calling it, quote, eerily reminiscent of other countries that have created lists of certain groups of people. The ACLU says it invites profiling and it turns entire communities into targets. And Mississippi has fewer than 28,000 undocumented residents, less than 1% of its population. Allen, is this constitutional? And what could this mean if other states follow Mississippi's lead?
I don't think other states are going to do it. That's A, because the population is very small. B, not smart planning. The state doesn't really have the resources to be able to tell what someone's status is. So that's the other thing. Making this registry is another constitutional issue that will need to be vetted. So I don't think that it's going to go really far. And this sort of registration causes problems. So in the remaining minutes, let me offer something, because I think with the ending of TPS and the deportation that's going to follow, everybody with a black or brown face becomes part of the concept of being removed. So now's a good time to review your rights. For everyone, know your rights, to know when you're pulled over, what you need to say, what you don't need to say. Are you free to leave? For everybody, U.S. citizen or not, you need to carry your documentation with you, your passport, your real ID, your birth certificate in some cases that you don't have, so that you can distinguish of your citizenry, because now they're going to be stopping black people left and right to determine whether they're Haitian, non-Haitian, these large immigrant populations or the like. We also need to hit the ground with the response. There's a large Haitian population in San Francisco and San Diego. And so one of the things that we need to do right now, I know it sounds weird, but call the White House. Let them know that you don't want these immigrants to become victims like the class that we talked about before, and to have mercy on them. Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. Call the Senate. There's a bill in the Senate right now that if they were to pass, would go to the presidency for signature, that gives some type of pathway of status. And the question about why people with these various statuses don't just do something, that immigration attorney who took advantage of those individuals shows you that when people try to do something, when there's no pathway, what happens to them? So there's no pathway created. Congress hasn't passed a bill since '86. So therefore, there's a big void in our system for people who are doing things here legally and don't have a pathway through. People in TPS status aren't taking any benefits. They don't get food stamp, they don't get SNAP, they don't get housing assistance. They're working, they're paying stuff every day, and they're vetted. And if they were to violate the crime, they would lose their status. So that concept about saying they're taking something isn't really true for any of the class of TPS holders sort of going through. And with 11 million people here undocumented, adding 300,000 or another million to it just doesn't make sense. And when you think about the vast number of things, here's always something to answer yourself. Why is there so much hate from Megyn Kelly with regards to one group of people that she doesn't even know, probably never even experienced? And can 1 million people be the problem for 350 million plus people in the country? The answer is absolutely not. Removing those individuals is not going to change anyone's lifestyle with regards to their income, their ability to work, or their health care, unless they were taking care of them. It's not going to make the U.S. any better when they're adding millions of dollars in taxes to both the state and federal level. So all these things combined seems to me to say to the government, now's a good time to step in with immigration reform from Congress so that it's lasting. The government to understand that when they, on their own webpage, on the state webpage for Haiti, it's a level 4. So that means do not travel. And sending people back with $2,100 makes them victims to be harmed, to be kidnapped or robbed. So that's not a smart sort of platform to do it. And sending Haitians to another country does not help us, nor does detaining them help us. And most importantly for California, when you remove those Haitian parents who have United States kids, do you think they're taking their kids back to a place where they're going to die? They're going to leave them here, and they're going to become wards of the state. And then that really becomes a burden for the taxpayer and everyone here. So we need to think about a holistic picture and concern of sort of addressing the immigration issue and really saying, are we solving for something, or is it hate? Because as we look at the history of the 250 years, anytime we led with hate was a failure in our democracy, and we did not receive it well, whether it be the Japanese nationals, whether it be enslaved individuals, whether it be Black individuals, whether it be Polish or Irish or Jewish individuals. Hate, when it led the way in the United States, made us a weaker country.
Allen Orr Jr., immigration attorney, business strategist, truth teller, with a mic drop there. Thank you for being with us today on A More Perfect Union. We appreciate the work and witness, your work and witness each and every day. When we come forward, Nancy Pelosi, after 40 years in Congress, is building something new. We'll get into that when we come forward. You're listening to A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 15.